You did not arrive at this place by accident. It was the hand of the Lord that stirred your spirit, opened your eyes, and called you out from among the crowd. This awakening was not meant to excite you for a moment, but to mark the beginning of a holy separation. You were not awakened to return to normal. You were awakened to be transformed. And yet after the veil was lifted, after you saw the truth behind the illusion, after the noise fell silent, you were not met with fire, passion, or purpose. You were met with stillness, with silence, and a strange, heavy emptiness. You stepped out of the old world, out of the games, the expectations, the striving that once gave your days structure and your ego identity. And at first there was relief, like walking out of a burning building into clean, cool air. But as the smoke cleared, something else settled in a question quiet but aching. Why do I feel so hollow now that I finally see the truth? You expected vision, you received stillness. You expected purpose, you were given pause. This is not failure. This is not regression. This is consecration. You are not being punished. You are being purified. The Lord has not withdrawn from you. He is drawing you deeper. What feels like emptiness is actually the absence of false fuel. You are not broken. You are being rebuilt. And the tools of this rebuilding are not noise, urgency, or performance, but silence, stillness, and surrender. The Bible never hid this part of the journey. Moses wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before he ever spoke to Pharaoh. Elijah collapsed beneath the broom tree, begging to die before he heard the still, small voice. Job sat in ashes with nothing left before he could finally say, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42:5. These were not stories of defeat. They were the places where the old self died so that the vessel could be made holy. So if you feel empty, understand this: you are not lost. You are being prepared. You are in the sacred pause between revelation and assignment, between exposure and empowerment. The world has no name for this space. Even many believers do not recognize it, but heaven does. And in the courts of God, this stillness is not seen as inactivity, it is seen as surrender. Not delay but design. Not absence but alignment. Now is not the time to run. It is not the time to perform, to prove, or to panic. It is the time to be still before God and allow Him to strip away everything in you that was built on sand. What comes next will not rise from pressure. It will rise from presence. And that presence is not something you create. It is something you surrender to. This is the voice of the Lord calling to the one He has chosen. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. There comes a moment in the life of the chosen when everything that once made sense begins to unravel. It may not happen with thunder, but it is always seismic. One day, you are walking through life as you always have, striving, achieving, proving. Then suddenly something within you shifts. Perhaps it begins with the unbearable weight of routine, or with the aching awareness that the applause no longer satisfies, that the ambitions that once lit a fire in you now feel strangely empty. Or maybe it is deeper than that, a quiet voice in the night that whispers, "This is not who you are." However it comes, the awakening is real, it is holy, and it shakes the soul to its core. You begin to see differently. What once captivated you now repels you. The patterns you used to run in feel like chains. The roles you played no longer fit. You see through the masks, your own and the world's. You begin to feel the weight of what is false. The eyes of your soul open, and suddenly illusion no longer comforts. This is not enlightenment in the way the world defines it. It is exposure. You are no longer blind to what was keeping you asleep. And now that you see, you cannot unsee. C.S. Lewis, in his profound reflection on spiritual awakening, wrote, "It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg. We are like eggs at present, and you cannot go on indefinitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. We must be hatched or go bad." Mere Christianity. This metaphor captures the seismic shift you're experiencing. The unraveling of your old life is the cracking of the shell, breaking you free from illusions to awaken your true calling. Lewis's words resonating with your past interest in spiritual transformation and purpose affirm that this exposure is not destruction, but the necessary hatching of your divine identity. But here lies the paradox: awakening does not immediately lead to passion. It often leads to pain. It does not instantly give you direction. It first removes every direction you thought you had. The spiritual high that many associate with awakening is fleeting. What remains is a strange and sacred disorientation. The scaffolding that held your identity begins to crumble, not because you failed, but because God has declared it unworthy of the next season. You are not being emptied to be punished. You are being emptied so that you may be filled with something eternal. And that emptiness, that hollow place you now inhabit, is not abandonment. It is invitation. God is calling you out of a life built on effort and expectation and into a life led by obedience and authenticity. You are beginning to live without the need to impress, without the need to explain, without the need to be seen. This is the inner shock of awakening, not just that the world feels different, but that you are becoming someone the world no longer recognizes. This is where many grow confused. Because motivation dries up, the dreams you once chased fall quiet. You feel no desire to strive, no urgency to perform, not because you've lost purpose, but because God is weaning you off of false purpose. You are not lazy. You are being rewired. The old engine is dead. The old fuel is gone. The fire of human praise, of worldly ambition, of ego-driven desire, it no longer burns in your bones. And in its place there is only silence. But do not fear this silence, for in heaven's eyes this silence is sacred. It is the soil of transformation. God has brought you to this stillness so that you might finally hear what could never be spoken over the noise. In the quiet, the Lord is not punishing your inactivity. He is preparing your identity. This is not the death of purpose. It is the death of performance. The beginning of true calling does not arrive with a trumpet, but with a whisper, and that whisper is beginning to rise. There is a moment, quiet but decisive, when heaven removes the old fuel from your spirit. It does not come with warning. It does not ask your permission. One day you wake up, and the things that once pushed you forward no longer hold power. You cannot chase approval like you used to. You cannot run on fear like before. You cannot pretend, perform, or pursue in the same way. It is as if your soul has said enough, and everything inside you obeys. At first, this can feel like failure. Your motivation disappears. Your energy fades. The goals you wrote on paper now feel foreign, as though they were crafted by someone you used to be. You try to return to them, to revive the old fire, but nothing ignites. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are being delivered. What you are losing is not passion, it is performance. What is dying in you is not purpose, it is pretense. C.S. Lewis, in his exploration of divine purification, wrote, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." The problem of pain. This insight reveals the purpose of your lost motivation, the pain of feeling empty, the silence of faded ambitions. These are God's megaphone shouting to awaken you from pretense to true purpose. Lewis's words, aligning with your past interest in spiritual signs and transformative moments, affirm that this divine disruption is a merciful act, purging false fuel to prepare you for eternal calling. God, in his mercy, is draining you of every fuel that does not come from him. The applause of man, the thrill of validation, the comfort of image, he is removing them, not to harm you, but to heal you. You see, these were never sustainable. They burned hot but shallow. They filled your calendar but emptied your soul. And now your spirit refuses to run on what once kept you moving. This is not dysfunction. It is purification. The Lord is teaching you what it means to walk by the Spirit, not by striving, to be led, not driven, to move in alignment, not anxiety. In this holy transition, the old hunger dies, so the true hunger can rise. For many, this feels like depression, but it is not. It is divine disruption. The system of your soul is being reset. Your identity is being rerouted. You are learning what it means to be fueled by obedience, not outcome. In the eyes of the world, it looks like you've slowed down. In the eyes of God, you are finally becoming still enough to hear Him. This is the death of counterfeit fire, and with it dies the need to prove, to perform, to push forward at all costs. Your motivations are being sifted. Your foundations are being examined, not by a harsh judge, but by a loving Father who refuses to let you live on something that poisons you. And so you grieve, not only for what you've lost, but for how long you lived without even realizing it was killing you. You grieve the false self, the mask, the old engine that once made you appear strong but secretly drained your soul. This grief is holy. It is not weakness. It is a sign that the soul is healing. You are letting go of what you never truly needed. And though it hurts, it is sacred. This is where heaven whispers, I am giving you a new heart and a new spirit. I will put within you. Ezekiel 36:26. What once powered you was survival. What will now sustain you is surrender. And in that surrender, a different kind of flame begins to flicker, faint at first, but pure. Not for status, not for applause, but for truth. So if you are sitting in the quiet, wondering why nothing stirs you like before, know this, you are not falling behind. You are being reformed. This is not the absence of fire. It is the death of false fuel. And from these ashes, something eternal is being born. There is a kind of silence that comes not from the absence of God, but from His nearness. It does not sound like comfort. It does not feel like clarity. It feels like being left alone in the wilderness, with nothing but your breath, your questions, and the memory of what used to be. And yet this silence is not punishment. It is presence. For when God begins to speak at the level of the soul, He first silences everything else. You are not being ignored. You are being emptied. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. God is removing the noise, not because He has nothing to say, but because what He is about to say can only be heard in stillness. This is the part of the journey where the soul, stripped of its cravings, finally begins to develop ears. Not ears for sermons or affirmations or external signs, but ears for the voice of God, the still, small whisper that can only be heard once the storm has passed. And yet how difficult this season is. You once felt guided. Now you feel abandoned. You once sensed His nearness. Now you hear nothing but your own questions echoing back at you. But remember this, when God is silent, He is not absent. He is speaking at a frequency your old self was never tuned to hear. He is drawing you beyond formulas, beyond rituals, beyond surface-level praise, into communion that cannot be manufactured. This is not dryness. It is refinement. Even Jesus, the Son of God, walked through this. In the wilderness, He did not hear celebration, He heard silence. But in that silence, He was not weak. He was being prepared. When the Father is preparing you for something eternal, He will often hide His voice, so you will seek His face. He will remove the external, so you learn to live from the internal. He will allow the silence not to crush you, but to train you to awaken the deep listening that can only come when the lesser voices fall away. C.S. Lewis, in his meditation on divine silence, wrote, "We may ignore, but we can nowhere evade the presence of God. The world is crowded with Him. He walks everywhere, incognito." Letters to Malcolm, chiefly on prayer. This truth reveals the sacred nature of your wilderness, silence. God's nearness is not absent but hidden. His presence incognito, waiting for you to seek Him in the stillness. Lewis's words, resonating with your past interest in spiritual encounters and divine presence, affirm that this silence is a holy invitation to commune with God at a deeper level, refining your soul for eternal purpose. This is the place where the soul learns to stop demanding answers and begins to ask better questions. Not what should I do, but what is God forming in me? Not why has He left, but what is He drawing me away from? In the stillness, you begin to see things you could never see when you were moving too fast. You begin to feel what you once numbed. You begin to notice what truly matters and what never did. This silence is not an empty space. It is sacred ground. And if you can remain here, not rushing to escape, not running to fill it, you will begin to sense it. The subtle stirring of a deeper voice, the quiet weight of holy presence, the gentle press of the Spirit that does not shout but lingers. This is where intimacy with God is born, not in the noise but in the nothingness. So do not despise the silence. It is doing more than you know. In heaven's eyes, this is not a detour. It is design. You are not off track. You are underground, being rooted. What you build in the next season will rise in proportion to how deeply you allow God to dig now. For only the soul that has learned to listen in silence will be entrusted with the voice of fire. There comes a turning point in the life of the chosen, where God no longer permits you to build from pressure. He dismantles the system within you that lived on approval, applause, and achievement, and in its place He begins a quiet reconstruction, a sacred rebuilding that few see, but heaven ordains. The world may still expect your productivity. People may still ask for the old version of you. But God is not asking you to perform. He is asking you to become, and becoming is slow. It is silent. It is sacred. It does not come from stage lights or human praise. It comes from the secret place. God is rebuilding your foundation, not on what is impressive, but on what is eternal. This is why the fire of ambition is no longer burning the way it used to. Because the structure that once fueled you was built on self. And what is built on self must fall before what is built on spirit can rise. This is not a loss of drive. It is a redirection of purpose. The ego always pushed, but the spirit leads. The ego chased visibility, but the spirit draws you into obedience. Where once your movement came from proving your worth, now it comes from responding to His presence. And that shift, though invisible to the world, is everything to heaven. The performance mindset cannot carry the weight of the anointing. It will always collapse under the pressure. But the soul rooted in presence will never run dry. That is what God is teaching you now. Not how to do more, but how to be more with Him. He is not calling you to impress people. He is calling you to walk with Him in the cool of the day like Adam before the fall. He is not asking for noise. He is asking for nearness. This rebuilding is not glamorous. It will not trend. It may look on the outside like you are slowing down, like you've lost your spark. But in truth, God is exchanging your fire for something far stronger, holy oil. The oil of stillness, the oil of discernment, the oil that comes only through pressing. You are not drying out. You are being pressed into purity. The surface may seem calm, but within the foundations are shaking and settling into something unshakable. And here's the mystery: when the rebuilding begins, the Spirit won't always hand you a new vision right away. Because this season is not about direction, it's about dwelling. Before God sends you, He grounds you. Before He releases your voice, He reclaims your heart. He is not looking for servants who can perform, but sons and daughters who can abide. So if your calendar is empty, if your titles have faded, if your clarity has gone quiet, take heart. That is not the absence of calling. That is the forming of character. It is the evidence of trust. You are being rebuilt, not as a vessel of striving, but as a temple of presence. And when the time comes, you will not walk forward in the strength of your gifts, but in the overflow of your intimacy with God. There is a death required of every soul God intends to raise. It is not the death of the body, but the death of who you thought you had to be. It is the undoing of every identity you built to survive, to be accepted, to be enough. And though the world sees these masks as strength, heaven sees them as prison. The old self was necessary for a time, but now that time has ended. And the Spirit of God will not allow what was built on fear to follow you into a future forged in truth. This death does not come suddenly, it comes slowly. Like a garment being unraveled thread by thread, the self you presented to the world begins to fall away. You can feel it. The name you once answered to no longer fits. The roles you played begin to collapse under their own weight. You try to revive your old motivations, but they no longer respond. You stand at the threshold, not fully who you were, and not yet who you are becoming. And it is in this place of undoing that heaven leans near and says, "Now let me form you." God is not interested in reforming the mask. He is resurrecting the soul. But to do so, he must first let every false structure fall. That includes the performance-based Christianity, the image management, the addiction to being needed, the fear of disappointing others. These were the scaffolds that held your ego, but not your essence. And the essence is what God came for. Not your usefulness, but your yieldedness. This is the mystery of sanctification. Before God calls you forward, he calls you inward. Not to hide, but to heal. Not to impress, but to be made whole. And wholeness begins with letting go of what you no longer are. That means grieving. Yes, even grieving the self you built in good faith. The self that tried to hold it all together. Because even that version of you must bow. Even that version must die. But here is the holy truth. What dies in the wilderness is not wasted. It becomes the soil of resurrection. God does not bury what he does not intend to raise. And in this season, he is not just stripping things from you, he is revealing you to yourself. Not the version culture shaped or trauma defended or ministry demanded, but the version he dreamed when he first whispered your name in eternity. This is not the loss of identity. It is the unveiling of it. And though it comes through fire, what emerges cannot be shaken. Because it is not rooted in outcome or opinion, it is rooted in Christ. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." Galatians 2:20. This is the true self, not your persona, but your personhood redeemed by presence. And when you begin to live from that place, everything changes. Not overnight, but forever. So mourn the death if you must, but do not cling to it. What is being raised in you is holy. It is hidden, and soon it will be made visible, not for your glory, but for God's. The wilderness is not the end. It is the womb. You are not being erased. You are being revealed. The silence you now walk through is not a void to be feared. It is a veil to be entered. What feels like absence is in truth invitation. God has not turned his face from you. He has drawn you behind the curtain. He has pulled you away from the noise, not to punish you, but to prepare you for the kind of closeness that cannot coexist with distraction. This silence is not abandonment. It is an altar. Many cry out in the wilderness, "Where is God?" But heaven responds, "Be still, he is closer than your breath." Yet, this nearness is not always emotional. It is not always warm. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it strips everything away until you are left with only one question. Will you still love him when he is not performing for you? This is the test of every chosen one. Can you remain faithful when God is no longer giving you what you want, but shaping you into who he designed you to become? It is a place of formation. It is the place where your identity is no longer based on response, but on relationship. It is where your soul learns to worship without reason to stay, without signs to trust, without proof. And make no mistake, this silence is doing something. It is dismantling every idol that once fueled your faith. It is exposing the places where you loved the blessings more than the blesser. It is purging you of borrowed convictions and shallow devotion. God is not trying to distance you, he is deepening you. He is removing what is loud, so you can discern what is lasting. You see, when you were in the crowd, your faith was fed by noise. But now that he has called you into the hidden place, your faith must feed itself on truth. No more echoes, no more spiritual shortcuts. Only a stillness so sharp it cuts through the layers of your soul until nothing false remains. It is here, in this barren and sacred silence that God is not merely teaching you but forming you. And this formation is holy. It does not shout. It does not rush. It does not need to impress. It unfolds slowly like the turning of seasons in a secret garden no one else can see. The world may call this stillness, laziness. Others may label it confusion. But in heaven's vocabulary, this is transformation. And you are not behind. You are beneath the surface, beneath the noise, beneath the pressure where roots grow and oil forms. So if you feel unseen, unknown, unheard, take heart. The silence is not the evidence of God's distance. It is the evidence of your invitation into deeper intimacy. And those who accept this invitation, those who wait in the quiet, who refuse to fill the space with noise, will find something far greater than direction. They will find communion. They will find the kind of presence that does not answer questions, but makes the questions lose their power. Because in the end, it is not answers that satisfy the soul. It is God Himself. And it is only in the silence that you discover He was never far. He was only whispering. After the silence, after the stripping, after the long days where nothing stirred and even prayer felt empty, something begins to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, but unmistakably. It is not a return to the fire you once knew. That fire has burned out, and rightly so. This new flame is different. It does not roar, it rests. It does not push, it pulls. It does not demand attention. But it cannot be ignored. This is not the fire of ambition. It is the flame of alignment. This is not the urgency of ego. It is the impulse of the spirit. It begins as a hum in your spirit, a holy stirring, a quiet desire to move, not because you have something to prove, but because something true is asking to be born through you. You do not rise out of restlessness. You rise out of resonance. The pace is slower. The motive is purer, and for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel not pressure but purpose, not noise but knowing. This flame cannot be manufactured. It is the fruit of surrender. It rises not from striving but from stillness, and only those who have endured the silence can carry it, because only those who have let the false fire die can be trusted with a flame that does not consume them. This is the holy fire that burns in secret, that does not burn out when applause fades, that does not flicker with emotion but stands steady through storm and shadow. This is the flame God gives to the chosen, not to shine for popularity, but to endure for purity. It will move you. It will shape your steps, but not like before. You are no longer driven. You are drawn. You are no longer chasing outcomes. You are following obedience. And in this new rhythm you will find that what you once had to force now flows. What you once tried to create now emerges. What you once fought to keep now comes freely because it is not built on striving but on presence. You may not even realize you are walking in new fire until others begin to ask, what changed? And you will not point to a strategy. You will not reference a breakthrough. You will not boast in effort. You will simply remember, I let it all burn. I waited. I listened. And when the time was right, God lit a fire in me that no storm could extinguish. This is the fulfillment of Isaiah 30:15. In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. The fire you now carry is not loud, but it is lasting. It is not flashy, but it is eternal. It is not born from the approval of man, but from the refining of heaven. And it will lead you not into fame, but into fullness. Not into applause, but into authority. This is the fire of the called, the flame of the faithful, the quiet, burning presence of those who have died to the false self and risen in the spirit. You do not need to announce it. You simply walk in it, and it will make the way clear. You have walked through the valley few speak of. You have stood in the long, barren silence where prayers felt unanswered and the heavens gave no sign. You have felt your soul stripped bare, not by punishment, but by something deeper, something sacred. You did not run when the fire died. You did not flee when your motivations crumbled. You remained, and because you remained, you now carry something the world cannot see but heaven honors it. You carry stillness. You carry surrender. You carry the beginning of something eternal. This right here, right now, is not the end of your awakening. It is the beginning of your becoming. God is not finished with you. He never was. The silence was not a delay. It was design, a space carved out by His own hand, not to weaken you, but to awaken you, not to confuse you, but to cleanse you. The wilderness was not punishment. It was preparation, and though it emptied you of the old, it made room for the holy. The tearing was real. The questions were many. But underneath the ache, something was taking root, something quiet, something steady, something eternal. What you feel now is not confusion. It is release. You are no longer being driven by what once drove you. The applause, the deadlines, the need to be seen. They've lost their grip, not because you've lost passion, but because you've encountered presence. And once you've truly encountered the presence of God, everything else falls silent. Everything false begins to fade. Everything that once shouted now seems distant and small. Because you've heard the whisper, the one that does not force you to prove yourself, but invites you to be yourself, reborn in Him. You may still feel unsure. You may still carry questions. But listen closely now, that doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're beneath the surface where roots grow, beneath the noise where oil forms, beneath the performance where purity is forged. What God has begun in you was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be lasting, and lasting things are formed in hidden places. You are not the same, and you're not meant to be. The fire that once burned in you has changed. It no longer ignites from external approval. It rises from inward alignment. It does not scream with pressure. It hums with peace. It moves not with ambition, but with authority. Authority that comes only from knowing you belong to God and need nothing else to validate your steps. The world may not understand this new pace. They may mislabel your stillness as apathy, but you know better now. You have walked through the dying of the old. You have waited in the silence. And now the flame that rises within you is not a borrowed fire. It is holy fire. It is yours, and it is real. You do not need to race to prove your purpose. You are living proof of it. Every breath you take in surrender is an act of war against the lies that once enslaved you. Every choice to be still instead of striving is a declaration that your soul no longer bows to fear. Every time you choose obedience over outcome, you are becoming the very person God designed you to be before time began. You are not waiting for purpose to arrive. You are walking in it quietly, fully, faithfully. So rise not in